Many journalists enter the field with at least a secret ambition that something that they write or produce for television or radio will change the world. And there's no better illustration of the possibility of that than the careers of Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, who 40 years ago began to expose the vast conspiracy to subvert American democracy that goes by the name of Watergate. That they inspired many of us in the 1970s to enter journalism. But they've been inspiring people constantly ever since then, and I hope and expect that they will inspire many of you here today. It is an honor for me to introduce two of my personal heroes, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're going to begin. Carl and I have been talking about this. This was 40 years ago that Watergate began, and so we're going to have to give it some context. And we thought we'd start this discussion with taking a particular moment in time, and it was January 1973. Katharine Graham, who was the publisher of the Washington Post, invited us up for lunch. Now, at this moment, Richard Nixon had won a landslide victory. Watergate was emphatically denied by the White House. Conventional wisdom at the time was that Nixon was too smart to be involved in anything like this. Carl and I had written a series of stories implicating the people closest to the president in not just the burglary of Watergate, but a massive campaign of sabotage and espionage to pick the person that Nixon would run against in 1972. It turned out that they were successful. So at this moment, our stories are not believed, quite frankly, by many of our colleagues at the Washington Post. So walk in, there's the boss, and she started quizzing me about Watergate. And at the end, she had the great killer CEO question, which was, when are we going to find out the truth about Watergate? When's it all going to come out? You've written all these stories. All of the key Nixon people, you have said it was a massive criminal conspiracy. We've published this. They've denied it. He won re-election. And I said that Carl and I felt very strongly that because when we went to see people at home at night to interview them, they were frightened. Indeed, it was a criminal conspiracy. All the incentives were not under any conditions to talk about it. They were paying the 5 Watergate burglars to keep silent so they wouldn't reveal other activities or who funded this or how it was done. So my answer to her question, when are we going to find out all about this, is never. And I remember looking across the table, and she had this pained, wounded, stricken look on her face, and she said the following: never, don't tell me never. I left the lunch a highly motivated employee.
And it did look like the answer might be never at the time, because the Nixon White House had been very successful in portraying Watergate, in quotes, as a third-rate burglary, as if this isolated event was about a bugging in this one building, when in fact what all our stories were about and were leading up to was that this was about an unprecedented, unconstitutional, massive, illegal campaign of political espionage and sabotage against the president's opponents in the other party, trying to pick themselves who the nominee of that party would be for President of the United States, and similarly an illegal campaign, unconstitutional, to undermine free speech, as it were, in terms of the anti-war movement, ordering break-ins into the psychiatrist's office of Daniel Ellsberg. So you had, and we had an inkling in our stories were going there, that this was about something unlike anything in American history in terms of what a president of the United States and those around him had set in motion and were covering up at that very moment.
We understand there's a generation, your generation, that basks and lives in the Facebook tweet world. And let's be honest, we don't. And if it existed 40 years ago, I suspect we would have adapted to it, but I don't think it would be a vehicle for disclosure of new information about Nixon.
If we were to even use it today, it might be if we had a Twitter follower or something to say, hey, did you see the story in the Wall Street Journal about X, Y, or Z? But not for reporting. My concern is that information might disappear or get gobbled up by readers, viewers, and a political system in which ideology, partisanship, money is more important than the truth.
I agree totally. I mean, I mean, it's the media is going through a convulsion. It's changing, and we have to get our act back together to not be chasing just the soundbite or the instant manufactured controversy, as Carl says, but to really do some things in depth. And it's hard.
But some institutions still do it. The New York Times still does it fairly regularly. The Washington Post still does it with some regularity. The Wall Street Journal occasionally does. There's still some commitments to real reporting.
Hofstra has the great opportunity to host presidential debate coming October. We just wanted to know how we, as student journalists, will be competing with other journalists, how we should approach covering the debate in a manner that people will take us seriously.
It's going to be a really big event, and as Carl was talking about, we have all this super PAC money that's going to be going in to the campaigns, and so much negative material on both candidates. They're going to be able to explain themselves and stand up for themselves, and I think it's going to be giant.